What's up guys, Kyle here again, and today we are checking out the Jet City JCA20H. Let's do it! Alright, hope you guys are doing great out there today. If this is your first time here at my channel, my name is Kyle, and what I do is I take awesome high-gain amplifiers, overdrives, speakers, guitars, cabinets, all sorts of stuff. I record them with a simple SM57 setup. My foot's caught on a cable. And I give you the unprocessed audio on your end. So if you're into East-End or thrash riffs, drop C hardcore riffs, and guys that definitely have no business doing videos of any sort, you're in the right place. Consider hitting the like button and subscribing on your way out so you don't miss any more of my stuff. And as I'm gonna pester you throughout the month of December, I am trying super hard to get to 8,000 subscribers by the end of the year. So if you are watching this and you're not subscribed, please do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Thank you. All right guys, so I'm acting like an idiot here today because I have an amp that I am very excited about. This is the Jet City JCA20H, and you're probably wondering, why am I excited about a little budget Soldano made in China that's been out for like 10 years? Well, this is the first time I've ever played one. You guys know that I've kind of been singing the praises of the Jet City JCA 50 and 100 watt amps for quite a while now. Anytime you guys ask me about budget stuff, I very frequently will recommend the Jet City stuff. Well, I've never gotten to try the 20 watt amp, and I've always been really curious about it. I finally got my hands on one, literally just set it up and dialed it in and played that riff that you guys heard, and immediately I love the thing. So the Jet City JCA20H was a collaboration between Mike Soldano and a couple other people. Doug, who is still running Jet City, I believe. I could be wrong on that, but I believe that he is still running Jet City and still taking custom orders with all sorts of really cool options. We're the guys who really got together and said, hey, let's bring a very affordable Soldano style circuit to the market, and let's see how well it does. They did that with the JCA line, and the 20 watt amp is the single channel version of that amp, 20 watts total. You've got two EL84 power tubes. If you've seen my channel before, you probably know that I am not a really big fan of the EL84 power tube, just because you can't really push it all that hard before it starts to break up and fall apart and not sound very good. So for that reason, I don't really tend to keep EL84 amps in my arsenal, because I am a belligerent amateur, and the types of shows that most of my bands play are local shows where I can't even guarantee that we're gonna get mic'd up. It might be in somebody's basement, because that's what punk rock, hardcore, and metal is really all about anyways. But yeah, a 20 watt amp in those scenarios, even through a 4x12 cab, not gonna cut it, guys. It's not gonna be loud enough to carry over a loud drummer. So that is why typically I'm not a fan of EL84 power amp style amps. But I'm not saying that they sound bad, because I do think that they sound really good until you push them to the point where they start to break up. But if you're gonna be recording in your house or playing a gig where you're mic'd up, this amp will do you just fine. It sounds good on lower volumes. You can kind of dial it in to sound okay at a lower volume without kind of, you know, rattling the windows and pissing all your neighbors off. So it is good for that, for sure. So this being a single channel amp, we have a very simple control layout, and I'm actually gonna try to rearrange this cable so you guys can actually see it. But we've got gain, bass, middle, treble, volume, and presence. There is very little guesswork when it comes to trying to dial this amp in. It's very straightforward. This amp also does not have an effects loop, so if you are not happy with the bass tone, you cannot put a 10-band EQ in a loop like you can with a lot of others to fine tune it. There's also no depth control on this model either, so it tends to suffer from a lack of low end. I have the bass dimed right now, and I still feel like I could use a little bit more, but that is kind of the nature of the Soldano overdrive circuit. That's just how it is. The original SLO100 did not have a depth mod, and a lot of people ended up either asking for it on their custom orders or sending theirs back to Mike to get it, because it does benefit from that extra low end push that you can get from the depth mod by tapping into the negative feedback circuit. So yeah, because this thing is stripped down, I am feeling the liberty to talk more than I usually do, which is not a good thing. So let's go ahead and jump into how this amp sounds. For that opening clip, I was using my Balaguer Typhon prototype with the Hypernova pickups, which are a modern, higher output ceramic pickup. I also had the Mud Killer by Electric Eye Audio Engaged, which is an overdrive. So we're gonna turn that off. We are going through my Metza Barba 4x12 cab, which has 2 redbacks and 2 UK V30s. I've got an SM57 on the V30, and that's what you guys are hearing on your end. I'm gonna put everything back to noon, including the presents. I'm gonna dial the gain back to 9 o'clock, and we're gonna play this amp, see how it sounds. Turning it on is usually a good first step, one that I often forget. All right, so right off the bat, we are like basically clean, maybe a tiny bit of break up there if you really dig in. But yeah, it's a very clanky, kind of chimey, clean type thing. Okay, so we're getting a tiny bit of breakup. Let's push that gain up to about 11 o'clock. And we are already in hard rock territory. We've got a nice crunch sound going. Okay, so that's not bad. Actually, I don't really feel the need to adjust the EQ much. It may be a little bit bright on the top end. Let's pull the treble back just a bit, but otherwise I feel like it's good as is for that type of tone. It sounds good to my ears, just like that. I think that sounds good for that type of stuff. Let's go ahead and bump the gain up to about 1 o'clock, and I can already hear a little bit more noise coming through the amp, so we're probably gonna get some more saturation. Pretty good, maybe a slight bit muffled like that, a little bit more mids, a little bit more treble. But yeah, overall, we've got kind of a nice, we're just under a really like heavy saturated tone. It's right on the cusp of being kind of that modern level of gain. But again, it's a little bit dry still. Let's go ahead and push it up to 3 o'clock. We got a scratchy pot here. Gonna have to clean that. All right, so as you can tell, we have the saturation now, but if you're going for a tight, thrashy, chugging type thing, it just doesn't have the tightness there. That's one common thing that I know a lot of people do complain about. I know that a lot of people love that looser low end. Myself personally, and a lot of the people that I talk to, when you start to dial the gain up on the Soldano style circuits, they do tend to get a little bit flubby, a little bit on the muddy side. So when you're really trying to push the saturation of the amp, you do get kind of some unwanted effects. The 2203 Marshall JCM800 JMP circuits the same way. It's very common on a lot of amps that when you really start to push the gain, that it starts to flub out and get a little bit muddy. Just keep that in mind. The reason that I do love this amp as much as I do is because it takes an overdrive extremely well. So when you hit the front end of the amp, it kind of immediately gets rid of all of those unwanted flubby frequencies, really tightens the amp up and adds some mids where the amp needs some mids. So even though we are a little bit flubby at the moment, it sounds really, really good as soon as you smack it with an overdrive in the front. So we're gonna pull that gain all the way up. Yeah, as soon as you do that and you try to turn the mids down to get like a fatter tone out of it, it really just starts to sound really muffled and weird. It actually sounded like I was playing on the neck pickup there. That was a pretty undesirable tone in my opinion, so let's dial these mids back up. Let's dial the treble down a little bit. Let's get that bass pumping. Let's get the gain down a little bit, and let's see if we can really get away with like a cool thrash tone even without an overdrive, because I know a lot of you guys don't like that I kick in overdrives as much as I do on my videos, so let's try to get something cool without it real quick. Again, there's just, it's too flubby in the low end. There's too much low mid roundness. It reminds me a lot of a rectifier in the low mids. I wonder why. But anyways, yeah, it really does remind me a lot of the rectifier's low mids when you kind of dial it like that. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna kick in the standard tube screamer, the TS9, because most of my viewers will be more familiar with that pedal than anything else on this board. So you guys can see how it reacts to a very common overdrive. As you can tell, a lot of those ugly low mid frequencies are already gone, so we can crank the bass, and I can actually pull the treble back because that did brighten the amp up quite a bit. And we were actually able to pull the gain back almost to 1 o'clock and still get plenty of saturation out of this thing. So I'm gonna pull the bass up the rest of the way, try to get as much low end reaction out of it as I can with this overdrive in front, and let's hear how that sounds. Okay, so it's still a little bit nasally in the low mid section, a little bit more than I would like. I actually feel that this amp benefits more from like an SD1 style overdrive where you can get the mids to be a little bit spikier, whereas they're much rounder in the TS9 and it rounds a lot of the highs out. So just keep that in mind. I'm gonna pull the mids back a little bit actually and add a little bit of treble. And the presence, the highs, the treble and the presence are both bright on these amps, but they tend to interact in a weird way, so it's very easy to go over the top. So I gotta keep an eye on those so we don't get too harsh in the high end. Okay, so that's a little bit better. If we pull the presence back and bump the highs or the treble up, it tends to kind of add a high end in the right space on the amp for me. The presence seems to be like a, I don't know, it's focused in a weird frequency where when you start to crank it, the amp overall just kind of gets really harsh. So I actually feel like it needs to be focused a little bit higher to kind of add that sizzly blanket off of the speakers type effect that you get with like a 6505 or 5150. But that's just my personal opinion. All right, so let's go ahead and try a different boost. I do like the TS9, but I feel like this Electric Eye Mud Killer kind of fits the amp a little bit better. It tightens the low end, but it actually also makes it a little bit more percussive. All right, so we can actually add a little bit more treble there because it doesn't add as much high end. Instead, why don't we actually dial the treble back and add some presence and see how that makes a difference. In my opinion, those frequencies are just way harsh on that presence knob, so we're gonna keep that down. We're gonna use the treble to dial in our highs. That sounds really good to me. Okay, so that sounds pretty good, but let's see what it sounds like with the mid scooped out a little bit. So with the mid scooped out on this amp, it really makes a big difference. It really focuses the mids a lot lower and gives the amp kind of like a guttural type thing going on. Which is actually kind of a better tone for that heavier type stuff. If you were to tune down a little bit, it gives it more of a growl. I actually really dig that. I think that sounds good. The last thing that I'm gonna do real quick, I'm gonna grab a guitar with active pickups and see how this amp reacts to a guitar with active pickups. All right, guys, so I have my EC1001T here that has the EMG 5766 set. Let's hear how the amp sounds with some active pickup action. I honestly really dig that. I don't tend to like the EMG sound very often. Apparently I just hit a fitness goal on my watch. Cool. But anyways, I don't like the chopped off high and low end that actives tend to have. There's a lot of compression there. But on this amp, it seems to work really well, especially with these settings. I'm actually gonna bump the mids back up and pull the treble back a little bit. That actually kind of gives us almost like a classic thrash tone from the 80s. A little bit nasally, a little bit rounded on the top, but really angry and aggressive sounding. I really dig that. That sounds good to me. I dig that for sure. All right, one more riff and drop D and then we'll give final thoughts for this thing. All right, guys, that is gonna do it for me today on the Jet City JCA20H. What did you guys think about it? What did you hear on your end that I did not hear on my end? I'm always curious to see what you guys think about these amps and the demo, so please do me a favor, leave your comments down below, and I will meet you down there to chat about it. As for my final thoughts on this thing, I think that it is an absolutely killer budget amp, especially for the used prices that they go for. This one usually goes for around $300 to $350, and I really just think that there's nothing in the range that can match that gives you, even though these are made in China, their build quality is good. unlike an amp like a Bugera, where 9 out of 10 people that leave comments on my Bugera videos are either previous owners or people who knew somebody who owned Bugeras that either went up in flames or just completely crapped the bed. You do not hear that about Jet Cities. I've never heard of reliability issues with Jet City amps. So if you want a good, cheap, reliable sounding amp that honestly gets fairly close to that Soldano sound. I have a couple of Soldanos myself. It's not as far off as you would think for the price tag difference. This is a great option. It does have a couple of drawbacks. I mean, it does lack an effects loop, which even myself, I like to have that there just in case I need it. It really needs a depth control to kind of dial up the bass frequencies so it doesn't sound too anemic. And I also feel that the presence is kind of placed in a frequency that just doesn't make a lot of sense. It just makes the amp really harsh when you start to dial that up. So you kind of end up leaving that down and using the treble to dial your highs into perfection as opposed to being able to fine tune with both controls. But other than that, I think it's a great sounding amp. I really, really dig it. I highly recommend it if you're looking at it, you're on the fence, and you want a really high gain ripper or something that just does really good classic 80s tones too with the gain dialed down. It does both of those things very well. So that's gonna do it for me today, guys. If you liked the video, please hit the like button. Consider subscribing on your way out. Down in the description of this video are all my support links, including my Sweetwater affiliate link and my Patreon pages, as well as my Discord server and Facebook group. Consider becoming a member of the Belligerent Amateur community by joining any one of those groups. I would love to have you guys around and keep this community growing as we push to 8,000. Thank you guys so much for watching. Kyle here again. We'll see you guys next time.